It's always difficult to have a presentation after such a brilliant presentation of my predecessor. So two things. First, my apologies that I do not speak Hungarian. I really don't. I cannot. I would love to. So I hope that my English is acceptable by you. And in order to do a step-by-step presentation, I keep my mouth shut now and show you a little film that is probably highlighting some of the issues that have already been presented before. So just 1 second.
Energie für die Welt, eine der größten Herausforderungen des 21. Jahrhunderts. Ideal für die Energieerzeugung der Zukunft, hochwertige Kunststoffe. Schon Alltag. Flexible Solarzellen und ultraflache Kunststoffbatterien aus Polymerfolien. Nachhaltigkeit durch Rohstoffeinsparung, Verwertung und Klimaschonung. Kein Problem für Kunststoffe. Architektur der Zukunft mit Kunststoffen zur Dämmung und Energiegewinnung. Das Licht von morgen, energiesparend und klimafreundlich, natürlich auf Polymerbasis. Hochminiaturisierte elektronische Bauteile, gedruckt auf Kunststofffolien. Sie helfen, Energie und Rohstoffe zu sparen. Polymere, keine andere Werkstoffklasse, bringt diese Vielfalt an Möglichkeiten für Form und Funktion mit. Hauchdünn und clever. Intelligente Verpackungen zeigen an, ob die Ware noch zum Verzehr geeignet ist. Unverzichtbar für die Mobilitätstechnologien der Zukunft. Sichere und rohstoffsparende Materialien, Kunststoffe. Wissenschaftliche Analysen beweisen, ihre hervorragende Energiebilanz prädestiniert polymere Werkstoffe für nachhaltige Zukunftstechnologien. Luft- und Raumfahrt. In diesen Schlüsseltechnologien dominieren zukünftig Kunststoffe. Sie verbinden geringes Eigengewicht mit höchster Belastbarkeit sowie Rohstoffeinsparung mit Wiederverwertbarkeit. Mit maßgeschneiderten Kunststoffen gelingt es Forschern, Expeditionen in die lebensfeindlichsten Regionen des Weltraums zu unternehmen. Computer und Kunststoffe. Diese Kombination wird unser Leben in Zukunft nachhaltig prägen. globale Vernetzung von Menschen und Technologien ist auf polymere Designerwerkstoffe angewiesen. Heute und morgen. Molekulare Polymermaterialien. Wie geschaffen für eine zukunftsfähige Entwicklung.
Now, we have seen quite a lot of the fantastic future possibilities of polymeric materials. The question is, are these fantastic opportunities answers to the actual problems that we are having in our world as it is? Now, what are the global trends in our society? It's probably a change in population. It's people getting older, more population, urbanization, the problem of climate, the problems of energy, and the restricted resources of energy. It's the medical advances. We're all getting older. And this also presents problems, and the technology of communications is certainly presents a lot of problems that we have to solve in our times. So what are the real problems that I want to address today? I think everyone is talking about the climate change and the climate problem. And the climate problem is very much linked to the idea that we produce too much of CO2, that we use too much of our resources, of fossil resources in particular, in order to be a basis for our lifestyle. Now, let's look what the actual use of the fossil energies that we dig out of the ground really is. Most of the fossil resources are more or less directly converted into CO2, either by combustion in the vehicle, or for heating purposes, or for generation of energy. So most of the uses is more or less immediate transformation of fossil oil resources into CO2 with an immediate use, which is energy, and this is more than 80%, or 80% it says here exactly. For the polymers, depending on what you really call a polymer, if you count lacquers and fibers, etc., it's probably more 6 to 7%. If you take the polymers that we call plastics, solid materials, it's in between 4 or 6% of the resources that are actually used for plastics. But these plastics carry their value, their calorific value, their energy value with them. It's not destroyed, it's just transformed into another state of the material. And of course there are other uses as well. Chemical industry, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, whatever. This is the other that's subsumized with these 14% in this slide. Now, do plastics that use only, let's say, 4 to 6% of the fossil resources, do they really destroy these resources? No, they don't. On the contrary, take the example, the very obvious example, of insulating of a house. Having a house that is built somewhere between the two world wars or in the 60s, the 70s, then you have probably a house that needs some 15 to 20 liters of oil per square meter and per year to heat and for warm water, etc. So these numbers come from a study in Germany in 2004. It's still valid because the houses, we are talking about the houses that have been built in the 60s and the 70s, so there hasn't been any change there. So they compare insulation with plastics, styrenics in the first place, or window frames, etc., with those conventional houses. And what you see is the result, the reduction of oil that you need, the reduction, of course, of CO2 in the same way. For each liter of oil that you save, you probably save approximately 2.7 or 3 kilograms of CO2, which translates into CO2 reduction and also into savings, very substantial savings money-wise. It's 1,700 euros per year. In your currency, it's certainly more, but 1,700 euros is quite some money. Yeah, this is just to give you an idea of, we're talking about liters per year, square meter and year. Actually, if you do insulation, you do a product that has not a lifespan of 1 year, but of several decades, usually 70 years or even more. Windows, okay, less, some 30 to 40 years usually. Insulation, some 50, 60, 70, even maybe 100 years. If you calculate the whole lifespan of such a product, then you come to quite incredible high numbers, as you see on the slide. This was obvious. Insulating saves energy. Now to something that's not so obvious. Many people think that packaging is just useless because hardly any one of us buys packaging. We buy goods, and they are wrapped, packaged, whatever. And when we are at home, we tear the packaging, throw it away, and use the good that we buy. Now, is packaging useless? That's a legitimate question. Depending on the function. When you think of food, food needs a lot of energy to be produced. It needs the lives of cows and pigs. But in the first place, immense number of resources in terms of energy. If we can extend the shelf life, as they say, of a product in the supermarket, so that the merchant doesn't have to throw away everything after 1 day that's not bought by anyone, but can have it another day to sell. And if you buy the good or the food and can save it in your refrigerator, not just 3 days, but a whole week, then you have much less that you throw away and much less that you have to produce. So if you do a balance overall, then you come out that, especially with food packaging, the food packaging is of high value. Even, I don't know whether in Hungary the situation is the same as in Germany or Austria. In those countries, people have large discussions about cucumbers. You know the cucumbers wrapped in plastics. Do they sell cucumbers in plastics here as well? Okay. Many people think, what a stupid idea. Any cucumber has a peel, green, yeah, where it's in. Why does it need another wrap around it? Well, if you buy a cucumber, put it in your refrigerator, and leave it there for 3 days, it's quite okay after 3 days. It's certainly not okay anymore after 5 days. If you use the same idea of your refrigerator also with a distribution channels, the cucumber has an extended life within this cover, coming from the farmer to the warehouse, to the distribution, from the distribution channel, your home, into the refrigerator. The number of days that the cucumber can survive is essential for the use of or the need of cucumbers. So in effect, this also helps save energy, even in this obviously nearly stupid example. Some of you who live alone will certainly not eat a whole cucumber in one. So if you cut the cucumber and store it again, then you see it is actual value to do that. Going away from cucumbers now to the big picture and to a European perspective, you see the number of savings in terms of energy here, or on the next slide, in terms of CO2 production. I mean, if you would just skip all the packaging, you would save some oil for the packaging, but you would have to invest more into production of more goods. So the balance would be, you could even have 21 million cars more in Europe. This is the same exhaust as is wasted if you do not package your goods. Well, of course, you know that in every modern car you find plastics. Here it's at 12 to 15% of plastics, which is, for a middle class or lower middle class car. The upper middle class cars is even more, it's 14 to 16 or even 17% now, with a rising tendency. It will always stay probably below 20 or even 18%, as BMW says. But this also leads to lighter cars, less petrol, less fuel that you use, and of course savings for the people who have to pay at the gas station, as well as savings for the environment. We have already seen in the other presentation the example of the Airbus. Same thing, lots of plastics components, and the next generation will even have more plastics than any other material in the structure of the airplane. So not talking about the carpets only, really in the carrying structure. So what is the balance? If you produce something, if you do anything, you produce CO2. I'm producing CO2 by talking to you. And if I would manufacture anything, I would produce even more CO2. This is nothing bad or nothing good in itself. It depends on the balance, what's in the end, because if I only produce CO2, it's not good. If I can save with the product, then we have to do a balance, and usually in the use phase of plastics products, we have savings of CO2. That's the green arrow below the middle picture there. And in the end of life of the product, we can either use recycling methodology or use the energy content of the product. And we also have some gain in energy and in CO2. But we have, of course, also to invest some energy, some CO2, in the process of collecting, in the process of actually recovering. So these are lots of numbers. What it's all about. Today, as an average for reasonable plastic products. We have, for the production of plastic products, on an average of applications, for each ton that we invest in CO2, we get back some 7, 8, 9 tons of CO2 savings. This will be even more if we extrapolate the technology into the year 2020, where you say that the balance will even be for 1 CO2 ton into some 15 CO2 tons savings. How much do we really use? How much plastics is in this world? It's tremendous. We started out with 1.5 million tons in 1950 after World War II. There the story really started in the lower left corner. And then we had a steady growth with some little glimpses in the 70s. You all remember, or some of you, not all of you, sorry, forgive me the younger ones. Some of us still remember the days of the energy crisis in the mid-70s. There you see a little blimp, but nothing really dramatical if you look at the whole picture. And we have again a little blimp that we all remember even better of the year 2008-2009, the big world crisis. And look at the whole picture when you really see the development. It's not so dramatic if we have the power to live for a couple of years more, then we will laugh or smile at least when we think of our present day problems. Altogether, we have a turnover of plastics material of worldwide of some 250 million tons. It's written here 280 million. That includes some other polymeric materials as well. Let's take the European perspective. What are we doing with these millions of tons of plastics? In Europe, and this is the numbers for the EU 27 countries, it's the biggest single application is packaging. Packaging with nearly 40%, then building and construction, very long-lived applications, then automotive and also aerospace. E&E is electrical and electronic applications, and others are all the rest, the cosmetics, the toothbrushes, etc. Will those markets grow or shrink? They will grow, but they will grow with different speeds. You see here on the left side, on the top, the NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Association, with an estimated growth rate over the years average of 2.8%, or Western Europe with 3.2%. But you also see higher numbers, especially in Central Europe and the former Soviet states, with an average, not these years, I must admit, but an average of a 7.3 aggregated growth rate, which is tremendous. You say also high rises in Asia without Japan. Japan is a very mature society and a mature industrial country, and in countries that are already very far developed, the demand is not as sharply rising as in those other younger regions. So this was a short overview from Plastics Europe. I don't know, do you plan to have questions and answers right now or later, or? Pardon me? No? Later. Oh, sorry. Okay, then thank you, and my word, köszönöm szépen. Thank you.